What's up, Kanyo kids? This is an update video on the new travel rules and requirements for coming to the Philippines. While the rules have relaxed, the requirements are still there, right? So the hotel quarantine and also the day 5 or day 7 PCR test. So depending on where you're coming from, the requirements are kind of different. The Philippines has introduced a different kind of categorization for countries. The risk categorization is based on the number of new cases in the country that you're coming from. The list of red countries is constantly changing based on the number of new cases in that country. But normally for the list of green countries, it's sort of the same unless any of those countries kind of regress. But otherwise, it's more or less growing continuously as things are getting better around the world. A few months ago, when I came to the Philippines, they only had red and green. Red meant you just simply couldn't come. You were banned from coming here. And then the green countries were the ones that they allowed but still had to undergo some form of hotel quarantine and PCR testing. Starting October 14, the Philippine government has introduced yellow countries. So these are countries that are neither green nor red, and they've also relaxed the rules for green countries. I made a table that kind of summarizes all the different requirements across the different risk categories and also whether or not you're fully vaccinated, because your vaccination status also affects the kind of quarantine and testing that you'll have to go through. If you're coming from a green country and you're fully vaccinated, you do not have to do any hotel quarantine or PCR testing when you arrive. And I think they also don't need you to do a home quarantine. So all you need to do is prove that you've been fully vaccinated. And we'll be discussing the type of proofs that are accepted. If you are a foreign national, then you must also do a pre-entry COVID test. If you are Filipino, however, it is optional. But if you do not provide the pre-entry COVID test, then you must do the hotel quarantine and the day 5 PCR test, and then another home quarantine to complete the rest of the 10 days. If you do have like a testing facility where you're coming from, you might as well take it because you're only spending like a few thousand pesos worth probably versus spending about 50,000 pesos on a hotel. Okay, maybe not 50,000, but like, you know. For the pre-entry COVID test, it's really just for people coming from the green countries, simply because they don't have to do the hotel quarantine. So it's just a precaution. But if you're coming from a yellow country or you're not fully vaccinated and you have to do the hotel quarantine anyway, the government doesn't really require you to do a pre-entry COVID test because it doesn't really matter. They'll find out eventually whether or not you have it through the day 5 or day 7 test. If you're fully vaccinated and you're coming from a green country, you no longer need to do the hotel quarantine and the PCR test when you arrive. The only things that you need to bring are the pre-entry COVID test that proves that you don't have COVID. Number 2, proof that you've been fully vaccinated. We'll discuss the list of approved proofs later on. Now, if you're fully vaccinated and you're coming from a yellow country, then you still need to do a hotel quarantine, but it's been reduced to 6 days, 5 nights. And the PCR test will be on day 5 instead of day 7. Now, if you get a negative result during your day 5 test, you still need to complete your home quarantine, but it's only up until the 10th day after you arrive. It used to be 2 weeks. Now, if you're not fully vaccinated, meaning you've received a partial vaccination or no vaccination, or you've recovered from COVID but have not received the full series of vaccinations, then you need to do 8 days, 7 nights hotel quarantine and a day 7 PCR test. If you come out negative during your day 7 test, then you need to complete your home quarantine up until the 14th day. So it's basically the original requirement. If you want to know what it's like to do the hotel quarantine and also the process at the airport, I have a video that documented my experience when I arrived in the Philippines around August. If you're coming from a red country, don't even bother because you're not allowed to come to the Philippines at the moment. As of today, October 24, the only country that's been listed is Romania. Now, what about the proof of vaccination, right? So there are a few proofs that are acknowledged by the Bureau of Quarantine or WHO. Number one, the VaxCert PH, Digital Vaccination Certificate. Number two, the International Certificate of Vaccination or Prophylaxis or ICV. And lastly, the National Digital Certificate of whatever country you're coming from. So like in the case of Canada, they just have it on a PDF file, but then lately they actually have like a QR code and you can take this from the provincial health website. Regardless of your vaccination status or the country that you're coming from, there are still some requirements that everyone needs to fulfill. Number one, filling up the One Health Pass, you need to do the Bureau of Quarantine e-Health Declaration Card or EHDC, which will generate a QR code. And this is something that you'll be presenting to the public health when you arrive. A negative PCR test, and this is mandatory for foreign nationals but optional for Filipinos. Then next, when you arrive at the airport, the check-in agent will give you the declaration and waiver form to fill up, indicating that you are healthy and fit. Lastly, during your flight, you'll be handed two more forms, the Bureau of Customs form and the arrival card, which you need to present at immigration. Now, on the hotel quarantine, so this is for people who are not fully vaccinated and also people coming from yellow countries. The hotel needs to be an accredited hotel. For all these different forms, you can find the links in the description below. I've also included the list of accredited hotels. Another reminder is that you need to book your own transfer to the hotel. It needs to be with the hotel or an official airport taxi. You can't just book like a Grab car or something. Oh, and your family and relatives can't pick you up if you're heading to your quarantine facility. But if, let's say, you're exempted from the hotel quarantine, then yes, your family or friends can pick you up from the airport and bring you straight home. So what about sharing rooms? Only one person is allowed per room unless you are traveling with family who are part of the same group or household. The second exemption is if you are a health and emergency frontline services personnel. And finally, if you are accompanying minors or people who need special assistance. Now, when you arrive at the airport, you need to listen to the briefing conducted by the Philippine Coast Guard. Before you leave the plane, some of the public health officials will be coming on board to take the temperature check for everyone. Then you also need to present your One Health Pass QR code. After everyone's been screened, that is the only time that you guys can leave the plane. So after you deplane, they will bring you to this triage where you'll be screened, and then again you need to show your QR code, after which you'll then be brought to another area where you have to pay for your PCR test if applicable. But if you've already paid online, you just have to show the digital receipt. Now, after all that, you guys come down to the baggage area where all of your bags will be waiting for you. Then before you walk out of the airport, you just have to hand over your customs form. Meet your designated hotel airport transfer outside, and they'll bring you straight to your hotel quarantine facility or your friends and family. Now, what if you turn out positive? If you turn out positive during your quarantine, you will have to extend at your own expense. If your symptoms are critical, then you will be brought to another quarantine facility where you'll be provided the appropriate care. You are not allowed to check out before you get your negative result. Once cleared, then that's the only time that you can ask your friends and relatives to pick you up from the hotel quarantine. Okay, so OFWs are a special case in terms of expenses, but the requirements are the same. So if you're fully vaccinated, if you're coming from a green or a yellow country, the rules are the same, except the hotel quarantine and the day 5 or day 7 PCR test are free. For people going to Canada, I have another video that covers the latest update on the travel rules and requirements, and another video that documents the experience itself. If you want to be notified of any new videos and updates, subscribe to my channel. Anyway, that's it. So I hope you guys found this helpful, and don't forget to smash that like button.